You know, the more and more I think about it, I have to wonder, were the filmmakers inspired by Alien? Because this movie feels heavily influenced by it. Welcome back, everyone. I'm ThatGuyMatt. Today's topic of discussion is Deep Blue Sea. Because after all, I've now had a handful of people actually ask for it, and I'm just thinking like, man, you guys must really love shark movies, don't you? Deep Blue Sea is a film from 1999 and was directed by Renny Harlin, a filmmaker who I've only seen a handful of movies from, most notably Deep Blue Sea, Cliffhanger, and what I know him most for, Die Hard 2. With the director's filmography out of the way, what is Deep Blue Sea about? We follow a group of scientists on an island research facility where they're trying to extract enhanced shark brain tissue samples in order to cure Alzheimer's. However, as a result, the sharks have become incredibly smart and not only seeking a way out of the facility, but aim to kill every remaining crew member left over. So yeah, it's another sharksploitation type film, which, if we're being honest, sometimes can be fun, admittedly, but the problem is that they often struggle to stand apart from their contemporaries. But regardless, we have to give it a fair shake because that's what the show is all about. So, without further ado, let's take a look at Deep Blue Sea and see if the movie still holds up to this day. The movie opens to a group of teens on a boat, drinking and having a good time.
We're having a party, man!
Oh, a party you say, huh? I'm glad you said something because I wouldn't have been able to tell. As they're chatting, they start feeling vibrations in the boat, and oh no, their wine has been spilled into the ocean. Fun fact for those of you who don't know, but a shark can smell one drop of blood from over a quarter of a mile away. Though I have to question if it actually works the same way with wine, because sure, it might be potent, but I don't know if that's how it works. Not long after, would you know, a shark shows up and bursts through the main deck and all the teens fall backwards into the water. However, they don't have any easy ways to get back on except for a rope, so they're pretty much fucked. That is until the shark is suddenly harpooned by a wrangler, Carter, played by Thomas Jane. We then cut to a boardroom where we're introduced to our lead scientist, Dr. Suzanne McAllister, played by Saffron Burrows. It turns out the shark from the opening sequence was part of an experiment and it somehow managed to escape the facility. Which I'm just going to say right now is incredibly stupid, and trust me, I will explain why later on. The executive, Russell Franklin, is played by Samuel Jackson. He's the one funding the research for Suzanne's project, which aims to cure Alzheimer's. He explains that the shark's escape was too risky and he needs to cut the funding as a result.
By the end, all my father could do was ask why my mother wasn't at home. And each time I told him she was dead, I had to watch him take that loss like a car wreck.
Whoa, wait a second here. So you mean to tell me that your dad was actually able to tell the difference between you and his wife with no problems at all? If that's the case, then I feel like he's doing a lot better than you're giving him credit for. Because keep in mind, I've had a family member lost due to dementia, and they could hardly tell the difference between me and my other siblings. She then gives a speech detailing that this research could be life-changing and that it could actually cure Alzheimer's altogether. She suggests that Russell come to the facility and see the results for himself. Upon arriving, we're then introduced to Dr. Janice Higgins, played by Jacqueline McKenzie. And not long after, we see Carter swimming in the shark bay as one chases after him. But Carter is a badass and manages to grab onto it and remove the license plate from its mouth. We're then introduced to the engineer of our movie, Tom, played by Michael Rapaport. And while he deals with sharks in this movie, his real-life biggest problem is dealing with weird-looking cats.
Don't fucking look at me like that. That's a weird-looking fucking cat.
We then jump over to the cook, Preacher, played by LL Cool J. And no, I'm not just saying that he is a preacher, his name also is Preacher. Man, he's got a lot going for himself in this movie. What, is he also a rapper? The shark from earlier is then eaten by all three test sharks. Susan is then thrown a party, where Russell gets more information regarding the research. Janice explains that the shark's brains were increased by 5 times the original mass, allowing them to extract more protein.
Genetic engineering to increase brain mass is in direct violation of the Harvard Genetics Compact, not to mention Chimera policy.
Now wait for everything to go horribly wrong. We then see Carter jumping into the shark bay in order to capture one for the experiment. Yes, the sharks actually do defy physics by swimming backwards. However, Jaws wasn't exactly the most scientifically accurate movie either, and there actually were times in Jaws 3 where a shark did swim backwards too, so if I'm gonna call it out in this movie, I gotta call it out in those movies too, despite my better interest. We then see the sharks take out the security footage, leaving Carter in the dark with no communication. It's kind of surprising that they knew that they were being watched this entire time anyway, but oh well. Either way, he manages to sedate one of the sharks and brings it into the research room. They conduct the experiment and extract the protein from the shark's brain, to which they celebrate as they discover active brain cells coming back to life. However, the celebration is cut short when Jim, played by Stellan Skarsgård, gets a little too close to the shark.
You did it.
Carter goes to retrieve the shotgun, but Susan lets the shark go. We then have some paramedics that are sent out via helicopter to retrieve Jim, during a dangerous storm no less. So you mean to tell me that a facility that is miles and miles away from any type of civilization does not have the proper equipment to take care of a situation like this? Can they even treat a paper cut? Regardless, Jim is lifted into the air and is within reach of the helicopter, but wouldn't you know the winch fails? No reason is given as to why, it just happens. Now here's where things get incredibly dumb. The shark grabs onto the gurney and drags the helicopter towards the communication tower, killing the rescue team. But as if that wasn't ridiculous enough on its own, the shark is then swimming with the gurney and Jim in its mouth towards the giant window in the research room. And you might be thinking it's just going to ram it into the window and shatter it, right? Nope. I'm sorry, but how is it able to do this? Just because it's smart, it doesn't mean it gets to defy physics. I mean, okay, it does swim backwards earlier in the movie and I can let that slide, but you're telling me that this shark is able to grab this and just throw it against the window. There is such a thing as underwater pressure and resistance. And keep in mind, the same thing applies to a gun. If you fire a gun underwater, you're lucky if the thing actually will travel just a few feet. Regardless, the crew all stand there for as long as possible before it finally shatters. They manage to just barely escape the room as they seal the door behind them. Back over with the Preacher, he tries ringing the tower for help. I gotta be honest and say that Preacher is probably the best part of this movie for me. He's a comic relief that also proves to be rather resourceful, but we'll get to him shortly. For now, we regroup with the other characters. Russell wants to know what Susan did to the sharks, and she explains that their brains weren't large enough to extract absorbent amounts of the protein, so they used gene therapy to increase their brain mass.
As a side effect, the sharks got smarter.
In that case, I have a couple of questions, okay? First of all, if the sharks were not producing enough protein as you say they weren't, why wouldn't you just have a couple extra sharks to, actually get that protein in the first place? And secondly, the shark that escaped from earlier was not the one that was actually genetically modified. It was the one that was eaten, right? So you're telling me that this quote-unquote lesser smart shark somehow miraculously found a way to escape this facility, but the 3 smart sharks couldn't? What was the reason? I don't understand. How did it manage to escape? Like, what happened? Moving on. The point is that they're all being hunted and must find a way to escape the surface. For now, we jump back to the Preacher as he's being chased by one of the sharks. And wouldn't you know, he finds his feathery friend just safe and sound. But old Toucan Sam is unfortunately eaten.
Bring your feathery ass here.
He takes refuge in an oven, but the shark somehow manages to turn it on. As a result, Preacher escapes through the top, jumps past the shark, and issues a funny one-liner.
You ate my bird.
We jump back to the crew as they begin to argue with each other. Obviously going into the pool is out of the question, so Tom suggests that they use the maintenance ladder to reach the surface. But it could be a hazard as they don't know if the shaft is stable. Russell chimes in saying that arguing will get them nowhere, and that it was the very thing that killed a few of his men when the avalanche hit. He's got a point. In tough situations, you want to band together, so I'm really glad that Russell here is our guy. Oh, never mind. Ultimately, they say fuck it and open the door, which, as you'd expect, destabilizes the room, and the water comes pouring in. They close the door and start climbing, but a shark comes in and breaks open the door, allowing the water to start rising again.
Now, level 2's only partially flooded. If I can get that access door open, the water will run off there. Buy some time.
So your plan is to open another door, which is already filled with water, in hopes that it will somehow make the water level rise slowly? I'm starting to think that Preacher's the only smart character in this entire movie. In any case, Carter opens the door, but the shaft starts shaking and causes the ladder to break. Janice falls into the water and is eaten. I gotta say that these are some hungry sharks. I mean, after all, they've killed one shark and eaten a handful of people, and I'm just surprised that they're not full by now. Preacher shows up and manages to save them all, but it's not over just yet. Even though they've made it to level 1, the stairs are still flooded. Their only plan now is to reroute the emergency generator and drain one of the stairways. As Carter and Tom put the plan into motion, we get a little downtime with Preacher. Despite being a man of God, he's an alcoholic and wants to leave behind a legacy.
We will begin with the perfect omelet, which is made with 2 eggs, not 3. Amateurs often add milk for density. This is a mistake.
Oh, thank God. I would have been so lost without that information. Jumping back to Carter and Tom, they manage to successfully reroute the power, but Tom is unfortunately killed in the process. Meanwhile, Susan is heading back to her dorm to retrieve the leftover data from the experiments? Wait a minute, so let me get this straight. Jim was taken up to the top surface to get medical attention. Okay, that makes sense, right? But then Susan goes back to her dorm, puts away the medical stuff, then goes back down to the research facility? Doesn't that seem like a lot of work? Regardless, she retrieves the data, but surprise surprise, one of the sharks shows up and nearly eats her. However, she manages to electrocute the shark with a wire and fries it, which also destroys the data, so all of this disaster was for nothing. The remaining 3 make it into the diving chamber, allowing the water to rise, and then slowly make it to the surface. Preacher is then viciously bitten, but manages to escape by stabbing the shark's eye with a crucifix. Fortunately, however, it's not fatal, so he just takes a nap. Carter notices all the fences have been lowered due to all the destruction, meaning the last shark will have a much easier time escaping into
the deep blue sea.
Oh, that's why they call it that.
They devise a plan to shoot the shark with a harpoon, which has a cable attached, that when connected with the positive end of a battery, it will explode. They spot the shark in the distance, but it's too far away to shoot. Susan then cuts her hand open and jumps into the water, signaling the shark in her direction. You know, funnily enough, after doing my research, I actually found that there was a different cut of this movie where Susan actually was supposed to live, but the test audiences actually didn't like that, so they changed it back to this one where she actually dies. So, yeah. Not long after, Preacher wakes up from his nap, knowing that his shark kill count is at stake. He then shoots the shark and taps the battery, blowing the son of a bitch to smithereens. The movie ends with all the sharks killed and the rescue team coming to save them. Which will be amusing for the workers because they now have to explain why the facility is gone and why the workers no longer have jobs. So, yeah. Anyway, that was Deep Blue Sea. And it's not bad, and it certainly can be entertaining, but only if you really don't think about it too much. I'm sure many will think that I hate this film as I've criticized many of its shortcomings throughout, but please make no mistake, I do enjoy Deep Blue Sea for what it is. I have fond memories of seeing it with my grandpa when I used to visit him a long time ago, so I have a soft spot for it. However, if we were to look at the film on a more objective level, it starts to fall apart in a lot of ways. For starters, the events that kickstarted the facility being destroyed are just ludicrous. I know that people will come at me and say, but Matt, if it didn't happen, then there wouldn't be a movie. And I get it. I'm just saying that similar situations have happened in better movies. Look at Jurassic Park, for instance. An underpaid employee shuts off the electric fences, and as a result, the whole park went to hell with dinosaurs being let loose. The film tries to be smart, and yet so many things are illogical. For example, how did the first shark manage to escape in the first place? If it escaped so easily, why didn't the other sharks, who mind you are genetically enhanced and modified, find a similar way to escape?
Look, man, he hadn't left the pen open last night. I could have got a good night's sleep.
Look, I already told the doc. I locked the pen like I do every other night. The fish got out some other way.
That's just one of the many illogical examples, even if we look past the giant glass window in the bottom floor of the research facility, or how the depressurization of certain rooms isn't immediate. With all that being said, is Deep Blue Sea still fun to watch? Yes, I think it is. The setting for the movie is actually very alien-like, which already makes it a lot more claustrophobic and thrilling. The characters, although they're more or less caricatures of themselves, are at least a decent cast. As I said earlier, the highlight for me is Preacher. Not only does he kill 2 of the 3 sharks, but he's arguably the most likable and, dare I say, resourceful character. Hell, even if we get down to the technical aspects, I can appreciate that for the most part the sharks were actually animatronic. It definitely shows how vicious they were capable of being. Even though some of the CGI looks pretty bad at times, at least it was done sparingly. The music was nothing to write home about, and a lot of it was also done sparingly, but there were a few pieces here and there that were nerve-wracking or intense. Overall, Deep Blue Sea is a pretty entertaining, albeit above average shark movie. It's got a lot of illogical shortcomings, which, hey, is a problem with many shark films in general, Jaws included. But if you can look past all that, it may hold you over with some intense shark attack scenes, a decent cast, and of course plenty of witty humor. It certainly isn't for everyone, but it is a fun time nonetheless. And if nothing else, I can tolerate Deep Blue Sea way more than most modern-day shark films, so at least it did something right. I'm very curious to see what everyone will think about this review, so if you agree or disagree, please let me know down in the comments below. With all that being said, guys, this has been That Guy Matt, and I will see you guys all in my next movie review. Until next time, guys, I hope you all take care.